thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the FDA's Bioresearch Monitoring Program, particularly the Compliance Program Guidance Manual as it pertains to the FDA's inspection of sponsors, CROs, and monitors. So this, of course, is an approach that the FDA uses to have its inspectors go out, and here's some core requirements when they're looking through these processes or these systems, really, at these entities. So as we go through this, as Barb indicated, we will be looking for your questions. We do have a good number of logins, so we'll keep an eye out for those. We certainly are available anytime after class as well to answer any questions that you might have. So focusing today, looking at that Bioresearch Monitoring Program that was updated a few years ago, that Compliance Program Guidance Manual, we'll talk about how it changed because of changes in the regulations, changes in the guidelines. We'll look at how it supports what we should be doing when we're looking at our own internal systems and subsystems and processes. We'll look at the application as reflected in regulatory communication, meaning what we're seeing in those warning letters or NIDPO letters, and also look at steps for preparation of an inspection. And what it comes down to really is these are the answers to the test questions, if you will. This is what the FDA will be asking you most likely. It's a good thing to know, certainly, and to incorporate and align your processes with that as well. So this Compliance Program Guidance Manual, they had an overhaul a few years ago. We saw an update in 3. We have one of those that is still outstanding. We have 7348.809 for IRBs, 810, which we'll discuss now, and 811 for clinical investigators and sponsor investigators. We also have 7348.001 for bioavailability, so the clinical piece as well as the analytical lab piece. So these are great tools to guide your processes as sponsors, not only to see what you're doing internally, but when you're looking at your vendors as well. So as we mentioned, this was updated most recently in March 2011, and really reflecting more of how we conduct research within the industry. Certainly, unfortunately, the FDA has been cited a few times in the past by the Office of Inspector General for really holding us accountable to regulations that don't match what we do, and rather than altering those regulations, holding us accountable more to those guidance documents. We look at those, we look at the regulatory communication, we get a sense of how the FDA is interpreting the regulations at present. But what it comes down to is the FDA is concerned with what we are concerned with. A little bit different perspective, but ultimately in clinical research, I always like to say our product is getting good data from protected subjects. So the BIMO program is focusing on making sure that right, safety, and welfare of participants have been protected and that data is verifiable and the integrity of that data has been retained. Also, of course, they're looking to see if we've been compliant with the regulations that govern the conduct and oversight of the studies that we will be involved in. And this is always very interesting when we go out and audit and see where the protocols don't always specify the regulations. They don't really kind of give us that framework. So we have to ask that question when we're going out. How do you know what it is you need to be following? We like to read those protocols that say you're going to follow applicable regulations and then ask people, so what are the applicable regulations that govern the conduct of this study? And unfortunately, those answers are not always reassuring. So we're going to look at this program and how they come about and interact with those sponsors, CROs, and monitors. The compliance program guidance manuals were really put together to make sure that when we go out, they're kind of SOPs for doing those inspections. When the FDA goes out, that they have uniformity of processes. Keeping in mind, again, that sponsor, CRO, and monitor inspections are product-specific. So the information that is in this presentation comes directly from that 7348.810. So the inspections under the program are going to be pre-announced. So a few years ago, I would say maybe even further back, but within the last 10 years or so, the FDA has transitioned more to having announced inspections for sponsors and CROs. We always had those primarily for clinicals because of scheduling, but the FDA spoke publicly in some presentations several years ago and said, we're showing up. We have limited resources as well. We're showing up, and the people with whom we need to speak are not available, or the records are not available. So there is a tendency to announce or pre-announce these inspections. Of course, if they're for cause, that changes things a bit. But they want to make sure that we're prepared. And to be prepared, we have to know the responsibilities that we take on when we become a sponsor. Whether we are truly a standalone sponsor entity, we become a regulated entity through that transfer of regulatory obligations under 21 CFR 312 as a CRO, or we are an investigator who decides we're going to run that investigator-initiated study. Sponsor responsibilities are outlined in the regulations to support that we have proper conduct of those studies, and the processes that we put in place go up to support that system of protecting the rights, safety, and welfare of those participants. We have to get approval from the agency, and interestingly enough, that's one of the top findings over the last few years for sponsors is failing to get that agency approval, which we'll talk about more in a bit.